Chapter 29:11. Arba glanced at them indifferently before picking up the little monk and turning to leave. Zhu Sanyang couldn't help but feel anxious, and she hurriedly said, "Crown Princess, we still need to bring this little monk Kong Kong back for Great Elder Kong Een to look over." The little monk wasn't an object, so why bring him back for Kong Een to look over? If these two didn't know how to take care of a child, then don't take care of him. They were simply too much. Arba glanced at them exasperatedly. "Go back and tell Great Elder that he's with me. Back then, it was your elder who directly handed him over to me. Even if I have to return him, I have to do it personally." Arba bluntly retorted the two. Kong Een, that darn baldy, was really too unreliable. He didn't go to Seekong Planet to take care of the little monk himself, but sent two people who had no patience for children to take care of him. This sleeping pill naturally had a time limit, and the little monk probably hadn't been following them for just a day or two. They'd been feeding the little monk sleeping pills the entire time? How could the child's body take it? The more she thought about it, the angrier Arba became, and her gaze toward the couple became increasingly unfriendly. "Why aren't you leaving?" the little fellow shouted impatiently. Did she want to continue being rebuked, or did she want to be rebuked? Zhu Sonyang and her husband rubbed their noses, knowing that they were in the wrong. They hurriedly cupped their hands and said, "Yes, Crown Princess. Then we'll go back and reply to Great Elder." Arba sneered. "You can reply however you like." Her gaze had already turned cold. Zhu Sonyang and her husband had been in the pugilistic world for many years, so how could they not understand other people's expressions? Although the little girl's realm wasn't as high as theirs, her status was much higher than theirs. Glancing at His Highness the Crown Prince, who didn't look too good, Zhu Sonyang promptly cupped her hands at the two people. She very perceptively tugged at her husband Zhu Fan's hand and pulled him to leave together. If they stayed any longer, who knew if the little Crown Princess would flare up at them on the spot? Arba took a deep breath. Seeing that the two people had already turned to leave, she wrapped the grey cloth around the little monk's chubby body and carried him to a nearby tree. "Is this drowsiness pill very difficult to cure?" "Wait for me." Chow Mu's figure flashed into Paradise Planet. With a cold stoic face, she picked some medicinal herbs that she needed from Paradise Planet's 100-herb garden. Soon, he refined an antidote and came out of the peach garden. In the blink of an eye, Arba came back with an antidote. He squatted under the tree and stuffed the antidote into the little monk's mouth. He then stroked the little monk's small body and helped him swallow the pill. After a short moment, the small monk's long eyelashes fluttered. Then, he slowly opened his eyes with a vacant look on his face. The first thing he saw was Arba's stoic face. Then, he saw the equally expressionless Mo Lien beside him. "Benefactress, your bandit husband actually entered this little monk's dream? Hurry up and chase him out." The small monk opened his mouth and said. Mo Lien's handsome face completely darkened. "Who's the bandit? Explain clearly." Mo Lien stared at the small monk with a spurious smile and said word by word. Hey, why did this feel so real?" The small monk reflexively pinched the back of his hand and muttered to himself, "It doesn't hurt. As expected, I'm dreaming." "Arba, you pinched my hand," the little stoic expressionlessly said. Chapter 29:12. The little monk couldn't help but feel embarrassed. His cute little face turned towards Arba, and he blinked his big, watery eyes. Female benefactor?" "Don't act cute," Arba said expressionlessly. Yes, this was the tone. He really wasn't dreaming. The female benefactor was right in front of him. "Female benefactor, it really is you, oh, female benefactor." As if he had just woken up from a dream, this child turned his little palm downwards and slapped his own thigh. It hurts. The little monk grinned, and suddenly reached out his two little radish-like hands and threw himself into Arba's arms. His tears were like golden beans falling down one by one. Female benefactor, you came to look for Kong Kong?" Arba's heart couldn't help but soften, but her face remained expressionless. She raised her little hand and patted his back twice. All right, a real man bleeds and doesn't cry. What are you crying for? Amitabha, this little monk is only 5 years old this year. Strictly speaking, I'm still not a real man. When this little monk achieves great merit one day, I will repay the 4 great favors and help the 3 hardships. Abba reached out and covered the little monk's little mouth. This child's habit of nagging since he was young couldn't be changed. It's fine if you're nagging, but you're still nagging about those Buddhas and gods all day long. You're so scholarly, don't you find it tiring? The little monk gazed at Chow Mu with a pair of large round eyes with distinct black and white. Benefactress, benefactress. It's not easy for men and women to touch each other. You let go of this little monk. Abba flicked his full forehead. Shut up. The little monk pursed his little mouth, drooped his little head, and said in a small voice, You've changed. You weren't like this before. Abba, you used to hug me and coax me in a small voice. The little monk Kong Kong said pitifully, You used to comb my hair and braid my hair. You weren't as fierce as you are now. This time, even Mo Lien was speechless. Speaking of which, do you have hair on your head? Why did she have to braid her hair? She was probably dreaming about his chow again. The child had dreamt of Jojo, who was as gentle as water, just like her mother. There was a 99% chance that she had taken Jojo as her mother. Abba stroked the little monk's head lovingly. Come, tell me, how do you feel now? This little monk's heart hurts. I feel uncomfortable everywhere. Benefactress, why don't you carry this little monk for a while? Kong Kong's chubby little hand blocked his heart. Abba! Exclamation point. Why did she want to slap this child to death so much? On the side, Mo Lien felt that something was amiss even more. Why is this little monk so good at flirting with girls? He must have been born with this flirting skill. How old is he? He's already so good at coaxing little girls. His 6 senses are really not clean. Before Abba could do anything, Mo Lien appeared in front of the 2 of them in a flash. She lifted the little monk's chubby body with her fingers. She said to the little monk heartbreakingly, You're too heavy. Abba's mouth twitched. Actually, she had also noticed that the little monk seemed to be even chubbier than before she left. She could imagine how well her mother, Wei Zichin, fed him at home. If he continues to be this fat, he'll develop horizontally. The little monk widened his round eyes. Benefactress, your husband is insulting people again. Chapter 29:13. Mo Lien looked at him expressionlessly. That's right, I'm arguing with you. Abba didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Strictly speaking, these 2 men, one big and one small, the small one really wasn't considered a man. Every time they met, they would always fight like dogs biting dogs for some reason. The little monk waved his 4 claws and kept kicking his legs in the air as he shouted, Benefactress, benefactress, hurry and save this little monk from your bandit husband. Abba looked at them speechlessly. He reached out and took the little monk from Mo Lien's hands and patted his back comfortingly. All right, don't always court death by yourself. The little monk put on an innocent face and looked at him. How was he courting death? It was clearly this Crown Prince Lien who was too petty. Benefactress was indeed his wife, but she was also his benefactress. The little monk's bun-like face was taut in anger as he turned his head to glare at Mo Lien. Then he turned his head and leaned on Abba's shoulder. Benefactress, how did you find me? His eyes suddenly lit up. Without waiting for Abba to speak, he continued, It must be because this little monk and benefactress are fated to have a deep relationship. Abba couldn't help but want to chuckle. Ever since he woke this child up, he hadn't stopped nagging until now. This really was a chatterbox little monk. Little master, you're very intelligent. Chen Qi, who had been watching silently for a long time, suddenly couldn't help but laugh. Little master, are you interested in learning forging from this old man? The little monk, Kong Kong, turned to glance at the old man and shook his head like a rattledrum. This little monk is a monk. First, I don't seek fame, and second, I don't seek profit. I don't need to delve into forging. Abba couldn't help but find it a bit funny when he heard this. He raised his hand and lightly poked the little monk's round face. Learning forging is very useful. You can forge a weapon that suits you. The little monk sneaked a glance at the dark-faced Prince Mo and quietly muttered, "Doesn't your husband know how to forge? What kind of weapon does this little monk want? If you want it, just ask your husband to make it for you." Abba didn't know whether to laugh or cry when he saw the meaning in the little monk's eyes. This child was used to bickering with Emolien, but at the crucial moment, she just had to think of Prince Mo. It could be seen that in the depths of his heart, he actually valued and approved of the crown prince very much. "Do you know who those black-clothed men chasing you are?" "What men in black?" The small monk looked around. He was slightly stunned when he saw that many black-clothed men were sprawled out on the withered grassland. "They're chasing me? Why are they chasing me?" the small monk asked with a baffled expression. As soon as he said this, Abba knew that it was impossible to get any useful information from the little monk. The little monk wouldn't know more than she did. Thinking of this, Abba couldn't help but sigh. She had only taken 2 steps with the little monk in her arms when she felt her body become slightly lighter. Abba lowered her head to look. Her arms were empty. The little monk had already been snatched away by her husband, who was standing at the side. "What are you doing?" The little monk immediately cried out in dissatisfaction. "This little monk doesn't want you to carry me." This stinky man was so stiff that his face hurt when he carried him. It wasn't as comfortable as the benefactress's hug at all. Emolien gently lowered her head and stroked his little head. She said with a smile that wasn't a smile, "Your objection is overruled." "Ah, I'm too sleepy. I need to catch up on my sleep." Chapter 29:14. Benefactress. Abba's head hurt when she heard him call her benefactress. She raised her hand and lightly knocked on the little Baldy's forehead. "Do you still remember how you came here?" Although this little monk was only 5 years old, he was a little shrewd and very clear-minded. The little fellow couldn't help but cry at the mention of the little monk's sad past. "When those 2 people came to take me, they said Master Abbot wanted them to take me back." This little monk hugged benefactress's mother and cried bitterly. After bidding farewell to benefactress's sister-in-law and family, this little monk was very sad the whole way. They didn't give this little monk vegetarian food to eat. This little monk's stomach grumbled the whole way. Speaking of this, the little monk appeared even more heartbroken. His large, pitiful eyes stared straight at Abba, making her not know whether to laugh or cry. To put it bluntly, the little monk missed his mother's cooking. On the way from Seekong Planet to China, he felt like he suffered a huge blow. There was no food to eat. This little monk originally wanted to dig up some mushrooms to stew a soup, but the couple said it would take too much time. This little monk didn't feel anything after that. "I was probably drugged by them, so I was in a daze the whole time," the little monk muttered, his bright, sparkling eyes staring at Abba. "Benefactress, do you have vegetarian buns?" Abba couldn't help but reach out and rub his shiny little head. She took out 2 vegetarian buns from her inner world and handed them to the little monk. "Where's your inner world? Where's your storage talisman? There's so much food inside, so why don't you eat?" The little monk shook his head. "Benefactress, there's a saying that wealth shouldn't be exposed. Although this little monk has no intention of harming others, I can't let my guard down." Emolien's mouth twitched, and she couldn't help but want to rub her forehead. She really wanted to explain to the little monk that those 2 vegetarian buns really didn't count as wealth. If you want to expose them, then expose them. No one will snatch them from you. Besides, this little monk shouldn't use this little monk's food reserves until we're at the end of our rope. Abba, let's just say that this little mischievous brat understood better than anyone else. After saying so much, the most important point was that the little monk did not trust Zhu Sanyang and her husband at all. At that time, with Zhu Sanyang and her husband's martial prowess, they came to Seekong Planet's Chow family. Even if the little monk was suspicious of their identities, he would still obediently follow them. Because if he didn't leave, he would definitely implicate the Qiao family. Qiao Mu understood the little monk's thoughts after a quick thought, and her heart softened into a complete mess. She reached out and hugged little Baldy, taking the initiative to kiss his bald head. Kong Kong, don't be like this in the future. If you have any doubts, you can tell my lord clearly. At that time, even if those two people wanted to force their way in, my mother and the others might not be unable to protect themselves. Because when she left a lot of things for her mother. They were all placed in the storage talisman beside her parents' bed. Benefactress, will you bring Benefactress's parents and siblings over to play with this little monk? I will. Arba's gaze was firm and full of expectations. Soon. The little monk nodded his head and took a bite of the bun. Suddenly, he seemed to have thought of something and raised his hand to touch his bald head. He cried out in alarm, Benefactress, this little monk has become a monk and is wholeheartedly devoted to Buddhism. I will not accept your love. You must not fall in love with this little monk. Amitabha Arba. Emolien's mouth twitched. She picked up the little monk and said, Shut up. Chapter 29:15. With the addition of the little monk, there were a lot of jokes along the way. Chen Qi and Lu Zheng also liked this child very much. They tried every possible way to persuade him, wanting to trick him into becoming a disciple to learn refining or array formation. The little monk's face remained unmoved as he refuted the two of them with a single sentence. Benefactors, don't think that you can casually find a successor and pass down your skills to him. Then, you can go to the Western paradise to meet the Buddha without any worries. As the saying goes, if you can't have the heart of the past, you can't have the heart of the present, and you can't have the heart of the future. If your heart is too attached to the past, the present, and the future, this so-called passage of time will lead to nothing in the end. If you desperately want to grasp something, but you can't get anything, Amitabha, it's all an endless illusion. The way to be a person is to stay true to your heart. Those things of the past are already in the past. After being lectured by the child, the two old men, Chen Qi and Lu Zheng, actually felt that the child's words were quite zen. It was really a stream of witty words. Moreover, this child's eyes were too sharp. He could see with a glance that they once wanted to die? Or was this child really a reincarnation of Buddha, able to see through people's hearts with just a glance? Arba couldn't help but want to laugh. She didn't expect these two old men to really be frightened by Kong Kong's nagging. Raising her hand to tug at Emolien's sleeve, Arba whispered, You've been carrying him along the way. Let him walk by himself for a while. Forget it. With his short legs, it's hard for him to walk. He didn't want to let this little Baldy down. The moment the Baldy got down, the first thing he did was to fly into his Jojo's arms. It was simply intolerable. Arba looked at Kong Kong sympathetically. The little monk really didn't learn from his mistakes. She didn't even know what to say to him when he was defeated in front of Prince Mo again and again. The four of them walked for a while. Chen Qi missed the fat rabbit, so he suggested to sit down and rest for a while and barbecue for a picnic. Qiao Mu didn't have any objections and even took out a barbecue rack from her inner world in a show of seriousness. After she had Chen Qi clean up the rabbit, she saw the little monk running back with a pile of flower mushrooms. Benefactress, have some mushroom soup. Arba looked at him expressionlessly. You'll be poisoned if you eat these mushrooms. The child picked brightly colored mushrooms and picked a bunch of inedible things. The little guy lowered his head dejectedly and said to Arba in an aggrieved manner, Then what should I eat? Emolien suddenly took out a carrot from her inner world and waved it in front of the little monk. I can make you a carrot soup. The little monk's eyes lit up and he nodded his little head repeatedly. Good, good. After you finish this carrot soup, you must completely forget the kiss that the benefactress left on your forehead just now. Don't mention it again in the future. The small monk blinked his eyes and glanced at the carrot. Then, he looked at Arba, who was busy barbecuing, and nodded his head as if he had made up his mind. Prince Mo nodded in satisfaction. He rolled up his wide sleeves and made a pot of vegetarian soup for the little monk. The crown prince even kindly walked around the area and picked a few edible mushrooms for him. He washed them clean, diced them, and sprinkled them down. Half an hour later, when Chen Qi and Lu Zhang picked up the rabbit leg that was completely charred and emitted a strong smell of smoke with trembling fingers, the little monk held up the pot of fragrant carrot and mushroom soup and drank it in small sips. Chapter 29:16. Chen Qi and Lu Zhang had a bitter expression on their faces as they looked at the little monk who was happily drinking his wine. Without tasting the food, he forcefully stuffed the roasted black rabbit leg into his mouth. With one bite, the two fellows' expressions changed drastically. Using the strength of 9 oxen and 2 tigers and the courage of the universe, they forcefully swallowed that piece of black rabbit leg meat. "How's the taste?" Abba looked at the two with a serious face and asked. It's all right. All right, your sister." Even during the years when they were exiled in Beiwang Valley, eating nutrient pills mixed with rainwater every day was still better than this rabbit leg meat. Looking at the little monk eating with relish, the two old men became more and more depressed. It turned out that their second sect master's culinary skills were actually so bad. Before, he even boasted that he would make a good meal for them. Was this what it meant to be good? It's not even as good as the pot of radish soup in the little monk's hand. Seeing the two old men's gazes constantly drifting towards him, the little monk hurriedly hugged his little soup pot and walked to the side with his short little legs, sitting down and eating. Still thinking that monks are merciful, not willing to give up even a little bit of food, simply shameful. The two old men secretly criticized a few times in their hearts. With a stiff face, they put down the rabbit leg in their hands. "What, you don't want to eat after one bite?" "No, no." Chen Qi awkwardly laughed twice. "Second sect master, your roasted meat is so delicious, we, can't bear to eat it all at once. We have to save it and digest it properly." Right. Lu Zhang was rarely on the same side as Chen Qi this time. He repeatedly nodded and said, "That's right. Second sect master. Just let us go." Abba glanced at them and snorted, "All right then." Saying that, he took out 2 dishes and 2 bowls of rice from the food box in his inner world and handed a pair of chopsticks to Emolien. Chen Qi's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. "No, second sect master, we can also eat rice." "Oh, didn't you two say you wanted to eat roasted meat?" Abba said calmly, "I think the roasted meat is enough for you two to share, we won't fight with you. We'll just eat these." Looking at the 2 dishes that Abba pointed at, the jade tofu and the sweet and sour fish slices, and then at the crystal-clear holy rice in the other person's bowl, the 2 elders were about to burst into tears. Only then did they realize that Mr. Jojo was deliberately trying to teach them a lesson. That rabbit meat must have been burnt on purpose. If Abba knew what the 2 of them were thinking, he would tell them expressionlessly, "Sorry, I've never been good at cooking since I was young." After lunch, they set off again. Half an hour later, they arrived at a small village at the foot of the Red Cloud Peak. Abba looked up at the black plaque hanging at the entrance of the village. The word, happiness, was written crookedly on it. A sincere smile finally appeared on Chen Qi's face. "That's great. When I came back here again, I found that the spiritual energy at Red Cloud Peak is still the densest." Abba looked around. "Are there still people living in this village? How can there be no people? This area used to be the most prosperous area in the surrounding 10 miles. There are hundreds of families living in the village." Chen Qi said, his voice paused slightly. After walking into the village and looking around for a while, Chen Qi couldn't help but say, That's strange. How can there be no people? This village wasn't like this before." Chapter 29:17. It's been more than 100 years, no matter how rich the village is, it can't be much better. Abba didn't feel surprised. The village looked dilapidated from the outside, and as soon as they walked in, they could see the ruins everywhere. They investigated from the beginning of the village to the end, but didn't find much, and there was no suspicious blood around, so they resentfully turned back to the beginning of the village. This village should be abandoned naturally. Chen Qi said with uncertainty, since there's no one here, let's go to the Red Cloud Peak. Arbor narrowed his eyes, looked up at the cloud-shrouded mountain peak in the distance, and subconsciously nodded his head. Who's there? At this moment, Lu Zhang suddenly raised his hand and shot out a flying star-concealed weapon. But after hearing a whoosh sound, the person was so scared that he fell to the ground, and the cane in his hand also fell to the ground with a bang. When Qiao Mu and the others focused their gazes, they saw that it was an elderly man in his twilight years. His yellowish eyes contained traces of terror as he stared at them without blinking. You, who are you? Why did you break into our happiness village? Lu Zhang saw that it was an old man without any cultivation, and couldn't help but secretly scold himself for being too nervous. He raised his hand and touched his nose, and smiled apologetically. Sir, I'm really sorry, I didn't expect you to suddenly appear at the entrance of the village. Just now we didn't see anyone, and your appearance was a bit abrupt. Sorry. Come, let me help you up. No need to trouble, sir. The old man supported himself with a cane, stood up shakily, and looked at them suspiciously. You guys? What are you doing in Happiness Village? Lu Zhang was about to speak, but Arbor rolled his eyes and said, We're looking for relatives. Looking for relatives? The old man had an incredulous expression, looked up and down Arbor. What's your relative's name? I don't want to hide it from you. I know everyone in this Happiness Village. Arbor made up a story. It's a distant relative, seems to be surnamed Hu. I'm here on a mission from my family. There's a profound grade cultivation method here, and I want to hand it over to him personally. Although the old man was not a cultivator, he had obviously heard of the rarity of the profound level cultivation method. Hearing this, he quickly said, Surnamed Hu, it could be Hu Erhua's family. Arbor didn't care about Hu Erhua and Chen Erhua. He just nodded and said, Can I trouble you to lead the way? This was obviously an empty village. She was very curious as to where this old man could take them and create another Hu Erhua. When the old man heard this, he happily nodded his head, but there was still some doubt in his eyes. I wonder why Fairy suddenly came to visit, and even said that she wanted to give a cultivation technique to Hu Erhua? Family mission, no comment. It was originally made up and full of mistakes. How could it stand up to the old man's continuous questioning of the details? Arbor only threw the old man an unfathomable expression, and he was completely intimidated. At this time, the old man was still thinking in his heart, they might be from some big sect or family. Hu Erhua might have really hit the jackpot. The old man trembled as he turned around and led them towards the end of the village. Chen Qi winked at Jojo and curled his lips. In fact, most of the people in this village had the surname Hu, he had told Jojo before. Chapter 29:18. When the old man turned around, Arbor's sharp eyes caught sight of a red rope peeking out from the old man's collar. Arbor knitted his brows and sized up the old man, but he didn't continue speaking. The group followed the old man to the very end of the eastern end of the village, where they silently exchanged glances with each other in front of a collapsed thatched hut. The little monk sniffled and leaned against Emolien's slender, ramrod-straight legs. Half of his body had shrunk behind Emolien's back, and he only poked out half of his small head, revealing a pair of large round eyes as he curiously gazed at the goateed old man in front of him. The old man led them around to the back of the collapsed hut. After knocking on the ground for a while, he suddenly moved aside one of the floor tiles. These floor tiles were originally covered with grass and wood. Normally, even if someone walked here, they wouldn't be noticed. Seeing this scene, Arbor's heart suddenly stirred for some reason. The scene before them seemed to be somewhat similar to the underground village they had previously destroyed on Seekong Planet, the one in the outskirts of the Mo Kingdom capital. Arbor calmly followed the old man's steps, his fingers twitching on Emolien's palm. Emolien nodded in understanding, exchanging a be careful look with each other. Seeing Qiao Mu move, the rest of the people naturally followed. Just as they were about to go down the underground passageway, the old man suddenly turned around and gave them a stiff smile that resembled a shriveled corpse. Everyone, you need a passage talisman to go down. This is for you to use for the time being. Keep it well." As he spoke, he handed over a jade talisman tied by a red rope. The word, safety, was engraved on it. "This is a safety talisman. It will bless you to have a smooth journey." Just as Arba was about to reach out to receive it, Emolien pressed down on his small hand. Emolien took the safety talisman from the old man in passing and nodded indifferently at him without losing her etiquette. "Lead the way." The old man shuddered and followed the crown prince's words to the underground passageway. The passageway was not wide and could only accommodate one person at a time. Xiao Mu had only taken 2 steps down when she felt waves of sinister wind assaulting her. It was as if there was a giant beast underground with its mouth wide open, waiting for them to jump into its trap. "Why is it so cold?" "Ah, it's quite cold here because we've raised the icicle flower tree here. Look." The old man pointed at the tree in front of them, which was isolated by a defensive barrier. Its leaves were completely covered in frost, and beautiful little flowers were wrapped in frost and snow, falling heavily on the branches like blooming plum blossoms. Each flower was made of ice crystals and snow, and it was very beautiful. "It'll be normal if we walk further in." Arba and the others followed the old man to the ground and looked up. He saw that the entrance of the passageway, which was originally a little bit of light, was now completely blocked by a stone slab, completely sealing off the way back. Arba pursed his lips tightly and turned to look at the old man. His eyesight was astonishing. Even if it was pitch black in front of him, he could still see some unfriendliness from the old man's wrinkled face. Someone who could help take care of such a large underground base was definitely not a good person. As a normal person, he had this kind of ability. He was probably also a vicious and merciless person. You couldn't judge a person by their appearance. Arba asked coldly, "Where is the Hu Erhua's house that you mentioned?" "Too sleepy. I woke up to catch up on 2 more chapters." Chapter 29-19. After exiting the passageway, they realized that the scale of this underground village was really not small. It was comparable to the village above. Most importantly, there were quite a lot of people. Looking at the layout of this village, there were probably hundreds of families. You really couldn't tell anything from the outside. At first glance, it really looked like a village that lived and worked in peace and contentment. Small stalls were set up along the streets, and the peddlers were shouting to the pedestrians coming and going. Men carrying hoes and preparing to go to the fields, women holding children's little hands and smiling women, all looked very simple. But if one looked closely, it was not difficult to discover that all of these people were surrounded by a faint layer of gloomy aura. The little monk took out a wooden fish from somewhere and knocked on it as he walked. He muttered obscure sutras as he walked and followed behind Emolien with his chubby little legs. His little appearance was really somewhat comical. Arba glanced at him and couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. But very quickly, everyone felt that their bodies seemed to be surrounded by a layer of warmth. The gloomy aura outside could no longer affect them in the slightest. Chen Qi was surprised and raised his head to look at the little monk who was still focused on knocking on the wooden fish. Needless to say, the little monk's body seemed to be covered with a layer of Buddha's light at this moment. Those gloomy and cold qi that came from all directions seemed to be frightened when they came into contact with the little monk's surroundings and hurriedly retreated. "Little master, can you stop knocking?" The old man leading the way frowned and turned to say to Arba, "Can you ask this little master to stop knocking?" He felt uncomfortable all over, as if his heart was about to jump out of his chest and beat wildly. Every time the little monk knocked on the wooden fish, it was like knocking on his heart, causing the old man's face to turn slightly pale. Arba shook his little head and said in all seriousness, "That won't do. Everyone has to have some hobbies. The little monk's hobby is to knock on the wooden fish. You can't erase this hobby of his." At this moment, Arba and Emolien were walking at the front of the group, while the little monk was walking behind them with his short legs. He was knocking on the wooden fish and murmuring something under his breath. His exquisite eyebrows didn't even raise. Chen Qi and Lu Zheng walked behind him. The little monk knocked on the wooden fish more and more tightly, the sound entering their ears. The old man's complexion turned unsightly. He turned his head and quickened his pace as he walked towards a house in the village. Huazi, Huazi. The old man couldn't help but call out as soon as he entered the house. Along the way, everyone gave them strange looks, which really made him feel uncomfortable. After the little monk entered the room, he walked to the wooden armchair at the side and sat down. The wooden fish didn't stop and was still knocked rhythmically. The burly man named Huazi walked out of the inner hall with a dozen other burly men. His eyes were full of shrewdness as he glanced at the 5 people from Arbor. His gaze fell on the little monk who was knocking on the wooden fish. Village head, why did you bring a monk in? Huazi. The old man who was called village head by Hua moved to Hua's side in small steps and whispered a few words in his ear. Hua immediately put on a smile and looked towards Arbor. A few traces of a smile appeared on his fierce-looking face. So it's a distant relative of my family who has come to visit. Everyone, sit, sit, sit. Hua smiled until the fierce-looking muscles on his face were squeezed out. He raised his hand and clapped twice. Dozens of nimble and strong men rushed out from the central room and surrounded Emolienne and her group. You bunch of daring people. You don't want to take the road to heaven, but you want to barge into hell. The village head sneered. I originally wanted to take you in as villagers of Happiness Village. Since you don't want to give me face, then you can all go to hell. The safety talisman in Emolienne's hand suddenly emitted a layer of black fog. It quickly swept towards his face. Chapter 29-21. The corner of the old village chief's mouth curled into a deep sneer. He thought to himself, these youngsters are still too young. Their sudden appearance in the happy village already made him vigilant. In addition, the little girl casually made up some nonsense to him, saying that they were looking for relatives. At that time, he somewhat understood that these people probably found something and wanted to rely on him to continue the investigation. So he beat them at their own game and casually said something. Originally, he wanted to give them this protective talisman and secretly control these people, who knew, when the black gas in the protective talisman rushed to Emolienne's face, Emolienne's body suddenly emitted a faint Buddhist light, separating the black fog. The black fog trembled and retreated, afraid that it was too late. And at this time, if there was an enlightened monk here, he would definitely be shocked by the exquisiteness of this little monk's Buddhist teachings. It turns out that this little monk was knocking on the wooden fish while chanting scriptures, forming a swastika barrier around Arbor's group. The golden light was so bright that ordinary people could not see it with their naked eyes. But that black baleful aura was originally faint. Now that it was pushed back by the Buddhist light, it became more and more like a little white flower drifting in the wind and rain, as if it was about to dissipate. Of course, the old village chief and Hua could not see this Buddhist seal barrier. Even Emolienne and Arbor could only feel a trace of warmth, filling their surroundings. As for other things, they really could not see. The little monk finally stopped knocking on the wooden fish and raised his head. His jade-white little face was filled with a serious expression. He said in a methodical manner, Benefactor, the sea of bitterness is boundless. Turn back and the shore is at hand. If you turn back in time, this little monk can still save your lives. Otherwise, regret is hard to repent. The sea of bitterness in hell will be waiting for you. Stinky monk. What are you mumbling about? The old village chief flew into a rage out of humiliation. The clothes in front of his chest suddenly burst open. A ghost claw like withered vine stretched out from his chest, directly grabbing towards the little monk's neck. Emolienne and Xiao Mu had been paying attention to those people the entire time. When they saw the old village chief move, they immediately creased their brows. Emolienne's raven moon sword flew up and slashed down, instantly severing that old ghost's claw at the base. Ah! The old village chief roared angrily. Another 4 or 5 ghost claws drilled out from his chest and back. At this moment, his entire body seemed to be mutating rapidly. The ghost claws that came out from his front and back were all whipping towards Emolienne. Chi! 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 Layers of black smoke emerged from the places where the ghost claws struck. They were melted away by the golden light that was invisible to the naked eye. As a result, that ghost claw was eliminated before it could even reach Emolyen's side. Ah! The old village chief's face changed color as he saw this, and he began to twist crazily. "I'm going to kill you all. I'll kill you all." "Heh, so it's a demonic cultivator," Emolyen muttered to herself. She grabbed Aba's wrist and took 2 steps back. On the side, Chan Chi and Lu Zhang frowned as they looked at the old man in front of them. Why would such a thing appear in a normal village? Aba wasn't surprised at all. After all, she and Emolyen had experienced the underground village incident once before. This underground village was a paradise for cultivating demonic cultivators and raising zombies. Right, zombies. Aba glanced sideways at the door, but didn't see anything that looked like a zombie. Perhaps this place didn't raise zombies? Aba thought. The old village head was like a devil. He raised his neck and opened his mouth wide, sucking in the flesh and blood that the woman spilled down. His body began to mutate rapidly. His body was like a freak with a twisted neck. 17 or 18 ghost claws drilled out of his chest and back. Some were lashing out, some were clawing, and some were even clenched into fists and punched towards Aba's face. Chi, chi, chi. Aba didn't make a move. He saw that the ghost claws hadn't even reached his eyes when they were burned clean by purple flames. Aba's eyes flashed with a trace of coldness. He stared at the old village chief and the corners of his lips curled up slightly. Chapter 29-23. After sucking so much blood, the old village chief's entire body began to swell up a little. His face had already been squeezed out of shape. A ghost claw grew out of his neck, directly whipping towards Aba's body. "You look really disgusting." Aba coldly glanced at him, saying so. The village chief's face was red with anger, his 2 bulging dead fish eyes fiercely glared at her. "Hand over the black-level cultivation method you were talking about, and I can still spare your life." If it wasn't for his greed for the black-level cultivation method this little girl spoke of, he might have already made a move on them when they were still up there, instead of luring them in. Originally, he wanted to lure these 5 people in. If possible, he would take them in as villagers of Happiness Village. If not, after interrogating them for the cultivation method, he would rob them of everything in their inner worlds, then kill them and eat them. But now it seems that he really was hunting geese all day long, only to be pecked blind by the geese. He actually suffered such a big setback in front of a little bald donkey, simply hateful to the extreme. Black-level cultivation method? Aba coldly looked at him. A dead person doesn't need any cultivation method. Saying so, the startled swan dagger had already quietly flown in front of the village chief, a sword stabbing towards his left eye. This startled swan dagger was just a small dagger. When it flew out of his consciousness, it didn't make a sound at all. It wasn't until it was right in front of the old man's eyes that he suddenly realized, but in the next instant, he only felt pain in his eye. Half of his eyeball had been gouged out by the startled swan dagger. Ah! The old village chief had never suffered such a big loss. He suddenly shouted to the side, "Commander Hu, how long are you going to watch the show?" Hua Hua was complaining incessantly. How was he just watching the show? He wanted to make a move from the beginning, but just as he was about to make a move, a heavy pressure had already fallen on his body, pressing him down by a few inches. He couldn't even take a step forward. "Damn it!" Hua Hua forced out a few words from between his teeth. Old ghost. You hold on over there, my people will be here soon. I advise you to hurry up and let us go. If you let go now, I can still let you leave like this. Otherwise, what? Roar, roar, roar. Several different roars came from outside the courtyard. Hua Hua's face lit up as he coldly laughed and said, "Now, even if you want to leave, you won't be able to, arg." He felt a sharp pain in his ear as his left ear was cut off. "You talk too much," Aba said coldly, then turned to Emolyen and said, "I'll deal with the zombies outside. You deal with them." "Jojo." Don't worry. The little girl flashed him 2 white teeth. I'm a person with antibodies now. Even if this thing catches me, I'm not afraid of it. After saying that, it waved its little paw at him, leaving the 3 of them and the little monk to deal with Hua and the old village chief. He then went out of the house. As soon as he went out, he saw 3 fast-moving zombies with green faces and fangs rushing towards him. Looking at their speed, the veins all over their skin were twisting like earthworms. Their facial features were already blurred like humans. If he guessed correctly, these should be level 3 high-level zombies. Hua really put in a lot of effort this time. Chapter 29-24. Summoning 3 high-level zombies all at once to deal with them, wasn't she putting in a lot of effort? The corners of Arba's mouth curled up slightly. Come on then, I'll make you pay as much as you come. Hua, this commander Hu, was still too naive. Xiao Mu summoned out her black feral and leaped up to a high-level zombie with green fur growing out of its face. She struck it hard on the head. Bang! The corpse puppet was struck by the attack and immediately flew back several steps. Arba didn't give it a chance to catch its breath. She leaped forward lightly, her fingertips moving quickly, and a thorny wooden vine flew out from her hand, swinging straight at the zombie's face. Although this high-level zombie had developed intelligence, it wasn't as agile as a human. The zombie couldn't dodge this attack, and the thorny vine whip directly bloomed on its green-haired face. Plop! A piece of rotten flesh on the left side of the zombie's face fell to the ground, forming a sticky lump. Arba was disgusted by it and jumped to the side. At this time, the other 2 zombies also pounced and attacked Arba. Arba wouldn't give 3 high-level zombies a chance to attack her. Thus, she turned her gaze and dashed directly toward the earth wall on the side. When the 3 zombies saw her running away, they roared and chased after her. When they reached the earth wall, Arba's figure was nowhere to be seen. All of a sudden, Arba darted out from behind a zombie. The startled swan dagger flashed and sank into the back of the zombie's neck. At the same time, Arba's small hand was covered in a layer of frost, and she suddenly grabbed one of the zombie's arms. Tsk tisk. Caught off guard, the unlucky zombie's arm was torn off by Arba's small hand with the Vajra talisman attached to it. It didn't feel any pain. After Arba tore off its arm, it used its other hand to grab it. Thus, it was once again tragically cut off by Arba. The wall she was standing on now only allowed 1 zombie to pounce over and fight her. At this moment, the unlucky zombie's 2 hands were useless, so it could only use its body to fly. Arba initially thought that this high-level zombie might be like the one she had encountered before. Its limbs could be detached from its body, and even its fingers could be peeled off from its limbs to attack her like hidden weapons. However, after waiting for a long time, the corpse puppet did not take any further action. Obviously, it could not do so. Hua reckoned that they were defective high-grade zombie puppets, which was why he could summon 3 of them at once. This kind of high-level corpse puppet, regardless of whether it was an incomplete product or not, would definitely have a crystal core in its head. Arba threw out 3 ice blades and finished off the undead hag. Then, he dug out a grey crystal core from its head without any expression on his face. He weighed the crystal core in his hand and felt that it was not bad. However, the crystal core in the head of this level 3 advanced zombie puppet had mutated into a grey color. Could it also be due to its evolution? Arba stuffed the crystal core into her inner world, planning to throw it to her dear husband when she returned. After finishing off one of the 3, the other 2 were defective high-grade zombies, so it was more convenient to finish them off. As long as she guarded this wall and did not give them a chance to surround and attack her, there would definitely be no major problems. After finishing off the other 2 defective zombies in the same way, he dug out the crystal cores in their heads. Arba looked back and saw Emolien walking out of the door. My head hurts, I'm going to sleep first. Chapter 29-25. That Chen Qi drags the old village chief's crippled body over and heavily pushes him to the ground. Roar, roar. The old village chief lets out a series of inhuman cries, his whole face contorted into a dark purple color, his eyes bulging as if they're going to pop out of their sockets. Hu Erhua's appearance is also very miserable. When he was pushed out of the house by Lu Zheng, his hands were tied behind his back, his mouth kept clamoring, "What do you want to do? I advise you to think clearly before doing anything. The power behind us isn't something you people can resist." Abba glances at him and says coldly, "What power? Isn't it just Tianyun? You're just a small commander of Tianyun. Do you think you're important enough? Just because you died, Tianyun launched a revenge operation against us?" Hu Erhua's face stiffens slightly, his neck stiffening as he says, I. He's actually speechless. What kind of situation is this? He's actually speechless from a little girl's rebuke? Because he's also very clear that in the organization, there really are countless commanders like him. Whether it's strength or intelligence, he's not that outstanding. The organization simply won't care about his life or death. Thinking about it, he really hates it. Originally, he was doing well in the eastern part of north-facing Great Forest, and it took him many years to build a decent-sized base. If he only had to sharpen himself for another 2 or 3 years, maybe he'd be able to use this base to win the favor of those higher-ups in the organization. At that time, maybe he'd be able to advance even further. But now, a good base has been destroyed in the hands of these people. Hu Erhua hates it to no end just thinking about it. It's just that the old village chief, a pretty strong demonic cultivator, can't beat these people. At this time, the commotion caused by Hu Erhua's family has already attracted the attention of many villagers. Hu Erhua seems to have a very high status in the village. When the villagers saw Hu Erhua's family being besieged, they all spontaneously organized themselves, carrying hoes and rakes, running over with fiendish expressions, their emotions surging as they excitedly roared something. For a moment, the road is blocked by these villagers, crowded with people. Abba glances at them and says in a voice that's neither high nor low, "Do you want to know who this person is?" As she spoke, she kicked the tied-up old village chief in front of everyone. Everyone took a look and couldn't help but turn pale with fright. They whispered to each other, "Isn't that the old village chief? It can't be. How did the old village chief become like this?" At this time, another woman who had broken into Hu Erhua's house with the woman who had been killed rushed out and shouted to the villagers, "Everyone, you're right. It was him, the village chief. It's our village chief, that tree vine monster. Wow." More and more villagers gathered around. Everyone let out cries of disbelief. They couldn't be more familiar with this tree vine monster. In recent years, it would appear in the villagers' homes from time to time in the middle of the night, picking on the boys. The boy who had been dragged away had never returned. Many people said that he had been eaten alive by the tree vine monster. As for the village chief, once he knew that a boy had gone missing in the village, he would mobilize the entire village to search the nearby villages in secret. He would pretend to be worried and do his best for the villagers. Chapter 29-26. Who would have thought that this old village chief is actually that tree vine monster? He can actually pretend to be like this? In front of each of them, he pretends to be a sanctimonious, kind-hearted person, but in the end, the villagers' emotions surge. Each and every one of them is filled with righteous indignation and curses. This was especially true for the families who had lost their children. Their entire family went up to the village chief, kicking and punching him. Lu Zhang separates these ordinary villagers. "Don't get too close. This old guy is not a good person. Be careful not to get caught by the ghost claws on his body." Now they can clearly see the true face of this old village chief. They see that the countless ghost claw-like vines on his body have already been chopped into pieces, leaving only the long ghost claw on his neck, trying to struggle. He is a demonic cultivator. Abba lightly says, "Now can you tell us why you are in this underground village?" An old man shakily steps forward, crying and says, "Immortal, please save us. A few years ago, several monsters that look like humans appeared in our happy village, specifically eating people on sight. The people in the village who can escape have already escaped, leaving behind the old, weak, women and children, about 100 families. They are so poor that they don't even have money to run away. So the old village chief proposed to move our village underground. This way, first, we can effectively stop the man-eating monsters, second, the safety of the village can also be guaranteed. At that time we all felt that the village chief was wholeheartedly thinking for the village, so we are very grateful to him. Who knows, he is a beast in human face. The woman at the side also cries, originally we thought that if we moved to the underground, we would definitely not provoke monsters anymore. Who knew that good times don't last long? It has only been a few months since we moved to the underground village. Starting from 4 years ago, every year our village would lose a few boys, all taken away by that tree vine monster. At this point, many people begin to gnash their teeth. We were kept in the dark by this old man for so many years. We still wholeheartedly thought that he is a warm-hearted philanthropist. Arbor sneers. He lied to you more than this. After saying that, he stepped forward and kicked Hua. Lead the way to your nest. Hua shuddered from head to toe, and he looked at Xiao Mu in disbelief. How did this little girl know that he had another secret base here? It should be around that icicle flower tree, Arbor said with certainty. She noticed it when she came down. The area around the ice tree had the densest baleful Yin energy. It was so thick that it could not be dissolved. Arbor glanced at the villagers. Take off the amulets around your necks. She usually didn't like to explain this and that, but looking at the ignorant eyes of the villagers, she only felt that their stupidity was somewhat pitiful. Do they have to believe whatever others say? He had no judgment at all. He didn't even have a trace of doubt. This isn't a protective talisman at all. Arbor said indifferently. This is a profound Yin talisman. If you wear it for a long time, the Yin energy will enter your body, and you will be easily controlled by others. Even if your mind is strong enough, your body will continue to deteriorate year by year. Therefore, this Xian Yin talisman was of no benefit to an ordinary person. Hearing this, everyone turned pale with fright. They hurriedly took off the profound Yin talisman from their necks and threw it on the ground. Chapter 29-27. These people belong to the Tian Yun organization. Arbor looks around and says, to them, this place is just an extremely small stronghold in this organization. And you guys? Arbor looks at them again, are all their potential test subjects. If you don't believe me, then follow me. Without giving these shocked villagers a chance to ask questions, Arbor turns around and signals Chen Qi and Lu Zheng to carry the old village chief and Hua to follow him. Mo Lian's figure flashes and comes to Arbor's side. The two of them walk very quickly and arrive at the side of the frost-covered tree in a flash. Arbor looks up at the tree. From the outside, the tree seems to be completely fine. But that kind of Yin energy is so dense that it almost can't be dispersed. Lu Zheng throws Hua to the ground and kicks him. Let's do it. Hua shudders and turns to look at Arbor and Mo Lian standing behind him. Mo Lian curls her lips into a smile that isn't a smile. Do you want me to do it for you? Hua shudders again and scrambles forward a few steps. He circles around the ice tree and sends out a few palm strikes up and down. A jade talisman suddenly jumps out from his sleeve. Like a key, it is embedded in the barrier in front of him. This is really an important place. This barrier is even surrounded by a talisman array. After this talisman array opens, more and more Yin energy seeps out from inside. Normal people naturally can't sense it. Only people with profound cultivation can sense the Yin energy from this kind of Xian Yin talisman array. Arbor cultivates talisman array and naturally has a bit more perception than normal people. Usually, when he walked around the ice tree, he would only feel that it was a little cold at most. Suddenly, a cloud of black fog floats out from inside the ice tree. It opens its huge mouth like a ghost's head and rushes to swallow Arbor, who is standing at the front. The speed was so fast that Arbor only had time to put up an eggshell defensive barrier. He didn't have time to do anything else before he was swallowed by the black fog. A pair of cold, scarlet eyes appeared in the black fog. Without any explanation, it opened its mouth and roared at her. With a rumble, it swept towards Arbor like a tidal wave. In the blink of an eye, a barrier formed by black flames was erected in front of Arbor. The vibrations formed by the sound waves were completely isolated and didn't cause any damage to Arbor. Arbor had just removed the defensive barrier on her body when her slender waist was embraced by Emolien. Emolien didn't know if he was comforting her or comforting himself. He hugged her and unconsciously stroked her waist twice. Sir Jojo blinked and turned his head to look at the red-eyed zombie that had suddenly emerged from the black fog. This high-level zombie was different from the 3.5 defective ones from before. Not only could it emit sound waves, but it could also separate its hands from its body. 2 of its arms were about to fly in front of them. Emolien narrowed his cold eyes. Black lotus flowers the size of a fist, carrying cold and merciless killing intent, rose from the ground little by little. The black flames were swallowing the Yin energy around them. Lu Zhang and Chen Qi were isolated from the black fog. The instant the black fog transformed into a giant skeletal ghost face and opened its huge mouth to devour Qiao Mu, they only saw Crown Prince Mo's figure flicker and burrow inside without hesitation. The 2 of them were trying their best to release several bursts of holy power to disperse the ghost fog. I haven't been feeling well for the past 2 days. I'm still wandering outside and won't be home until 5 in the afternoon. Update around 7. Chapter 29-28. Suddenly, he realized that the skull face in front of him was gradually becoming distorted. It looked as if it had been stabbed by someone, and the huge skull mouth was crooked, as if it was howling something. All of a sudden, it was smashed from the inside. The whole mass of black fog was torn apart from the middle, and gradually turned into fragmented shadows. Wisp by wisp, it scattered in all directions. The figures of Arbor and Emolien, who were originally swallowed by the black fog, also appeared. As for Hu Erhua, who had put up a final struggle and used a sinister move, Arbor saw that his eyes were wide open, and there was a black hole burned in his neck when he came out. It was obvious that he had been executed by Emolien in a rage, and was already thoroughly dead. Roar! When the villagers saw a human-shaped corpse puppet jump out, they all cried out in alarm. It's this man-eating monster! Man-eating monster! Emolien's finger moved, and a slender whip made of black flames coiled around the corpse puppet's head with a whoosh. With a heavy whip, the corpse puppet's head was flung. Pa! A crisp sound rang out, and this high-level corpse puppet let out a painful roar like a human. Emolien's figure flashed, and she quickly came to its side. A fierce light flashed in her hand, and she swiftly drew the black flames into the raven moon. The slender pure black sword suddenly released a black light that was as pure as the night. The pure ink-colored light dazzled the eyes of everyone present. The black light that bloomed from the raven moon sword formed the shape of a huge sword in midair. It descended from the sky, and went straight for the high-level corpse puppet's head. That corpse puppet strongly felt the taste of danger approaching, but there was simply no way to dodge, no way to dodge. The illusion of the huge black sword chopped that corpse puppet from the head down, and directly split it into 2 halves. It made those rotten and necrotic internal organs in its body, which were almost unrecognizable from their original appearance, all scattered and blossomed all over the ground. It was not badly mutilated, but that scene would make people have nightmares at night. 1 hit, 1 kill. Arbor glanced at it, and sighed without saying anything. This man was really... He didn't know what to say. He was too vengeful. Just because this corpse puppet had wanted to tear her apart, he had completely torn her apart when he attacked. What a bloodthirsty child, but he was really likable. When Emolien turned his head, he saw his wifey smiling at him. The little fellow's smile was like the melting of the first snow and the blooming of flowers. He couldn't help but smile as well. His originally cold and murderous face melted like ice, showing a bit of gentleness. The 2 of them looked at each other and Emolien was overjoyed. She floated to her side and held her little hand. Jojo, you're smiling. The little guy reached out and touched his little face. Did he smile? It turned out that he was smiling so naturally that he didn't even notice it. At this time, The black fog around the ice tree had already dispersed. Everyone was shocked to see the scene in front of them. After the talisman formation was unraveled, its original appearance was revealed. The ice tree in front of them looked like it was planted in a mass grave. The roots of the tree were piled with many animal and human skeletons. It looked like they had died in extreme pain and disgust. Amit Ba. The little monk looked over with a serious face, but his eyes were suddenly blinded by Arba. Children shouldn't look at so many messy things. Arba knocked his smooth little head. Wait. Chapter 29:29. The little stoic hastily pulled her husband's hand and pattered over. Sure enough, they saw a pitch-black sinkhole under the ice tree. There was a steep passage inside that led to an unknown place. I'll go down and take a look, Emolienne said as she squeezed her small hand. Arba vigorously shook her small head. Let's go together. The little monk hastily grabbed her hand. Benefactress, I'll go with you. Why are you joining in the fun? Stay here. You can't recite the rebirth incantation of so many people by yourself at such a young age. You have to find a monastery for this. Before Arba could finish speaking, she saw the little monk shake his small head. This young monk feels that something is off down there. This aura is seriously too insidious. Arba's mouth couldn't help but twitch. How could this little monk be so comical and adorable? The old monk called himself Old Monk, but he followed the trend and called him Little Monk. Stay here even if it's insidious. Arba poked his forehead and pulled Emolienne down that steep path. Amit Ba. The little monk grumbled. Benefactress, you should bring this young monk along. This young monk can help you a bit with a Buddhist seal. Oh. Benefactress. Benefactress. Benefactress was really strange. Why did she seem to be fleeing in defeat? She pulled that Prince Emo down the sinkhole as if she was fleeing. Chen Qizheng, pay attention to your defenses. Arba tossed out this sentence before leaving. She and Emolienne floated down that long, steep staircase. This long staircase was about several hundred meters down. When they reached the bottom, the rocks under their feet were quite painful. Arba kicked her small feet and creased her brows. Emolienne looked down at her. A black fire spread over and melted the rocks several hundred meters in front of her into powder, which then spread out on the ground. Soon, a bit of underground water seeped out from under the powdered rocks, but it didn't affect their walking. Jojo felt that the stone powder was quite comfortable to step on. He looked up at Emolienne and said, "There's an underground water source here, right?" Emolienne nodded. "I think so. I wonder what's inside." It was reasonable to say that the little monk was quite sharp. If he said that the aura below was sinister, then there must be something extremely disgusting up ahead. Children should watch less of those messy things, lest they get nightmares at night. The two of them moved very quickly. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the front of the passage. They stood in front of a locked iron door. Without another word, Emolienne melted that iron door with his fire. So Jojo calmly stepped over a puddle of liquid that had been melted by the black fire. Then he frowned. The smell was extremely fishy, causing the two of them to subconsciously take a step back and quickly block off their five senses. The little fellow looked ahead with disdain. It was dark at the end, and there seemed to be a large stone room. After blocking off their five senses, the two of them felt a little better. They ran to the end and saw three strange-looking animals squatting in front of the stone room. Speaking of which, they might not be animals. This was because these three animals all looked very strange. They all had human-like heads, but they were of different sizes. One of them had the body of a lion, another had a pair of eagle wings on its back, and the last one had copper skin and iron bones wrapped in steel rhinoceros skin. The person with the lion's body had a very large head, like a winter melon planted on the lion's body. See you at 12. Chapter 29:30. As for the one with eagle wings, its head is only the size of a fist. Under its slender neck, there's a huge eagle's body, its body proportions are very uncoordinated. It makes people feel nauseous just by looking at it. The other monster, wrapped in thick rhinoceros skin, has a pair of curly and sharp horns on its head. Let's call these three strange things that are a combination of man and beast. They all have the same characteristic, each pair of scarlet eyes, their expression ferocious and terrifying. Abba looks at these three bronze statues with a strange expression. After a long while, he finds his voice and tugs at Mo Lien's sleeve. Lien, this leader of Tianyun, don't tell me he thinks of himself as the divine creator? Mo Lien's mouth twitches, revealing a contemptuous smile. Look at the name of the organization he came up with. Tianyun. Tianyun. He just thinks of himself as the heavenly Tao, as the heavens, and now he's just casually creating humans. Why not? Abba suddenly brightens, nodding. You have a point. These three bronze statues clearly represent strength, speed, and defense. Mo Lien says with a smile, this leader of Tianyun wants to recreate this world. Now it seems that he doesn't want to exterminate humanity. He just wants to become stronger. The mutated drug he created was obviously meant to improve the physique of ordinary people. Let the human body gain the strength of a tiger or wolf, the speed of an eagle or other abilities, and the defensive power of a rhinoceros. And then he failed. Abba's eyes brighten. The more he says, the more he feels that their speculation should be close to the truth. This experiment should have started a long time ago. Mo Lien frowns. I suspect it's been at least 100 years. Abba clenches his small fist. You mean, because of the repeated failures of improvement, this leader of Tianyun began to get impatient. So he thought of a way to rely on the night cowbirds to spread the mutated drug, to see how many people can mutate better, and how many people will become failures. What a lunatic. Mo Lien shook her head. The battlefield in the lower star region became his final choice. Abba clenched his small fist again. This person must be from the upper three provinces. Why do you say that? Mo Lien couldn't help but laugh. His Jojo, with her face full of righteous indignation, looked so beautiful. It's common for people from the upper three prefectures to look down on the lower realm and the middle 6 prefectures. Abba pursed his lips and said, this person didn't even build the underground village near the imperial capital. Instead, he built it in such a remote place, facing the rosy clouds peak in the east of the great forest. Clearly, they don't want to destroy the living environment of the 3 continents for the time being. The little fellow snorted. Come to think of it, it must be because he lives on this continent. Mo Lien had to admit that the little fellow's analysis was very reasonable. Moreover, according to the previous investigation, the headquarters of Tianyun is very likely to be hidden somewhere in the 3 continents. Isn't the leader of Tianyun thinking too highly of himself? Sir Jojo rolled his eyes. Does he think the world is unfair or what? Not only does he want to create a world, but he also wants to create a human? Oh no, maybe it shouldn't be called creating a human, but creating some kind of mysterious creature. Chapter 29:31. He's an extremely ambitious person. Mo Lien sighed. If he could set up this trap 100 years ago, it means that this is a mission passed down from generation to generation. A family mission? You could say that. Mo Lien nodded. Or maybe it's a sect mission, or an aristocratic family, or even a mission passed down from generation to generation. If that's the case, then every major power in the 3 states is worthy of suspicion. Abba was speechless. There were at least 800, if not 1,000 big and small powers in the 3 states. Looking for clues about the heavenly fortune from these powers was like looking for a needle in a haystack. Maybe I'm overthinking it. Mo Lien smiled and shook her hand. I'll move these bronze statues away. Qiao Mu shook her head and said disdainfully, these bronze statues make people feel uncomfortable just by looking at them. How about we shatter them? Mo Lien turned to look at his little wife and nodded. Okay. Abba threw him 2 Vajra talismans and attached them to his hands. After a few punches, the 3 bronze statues were broken into pieces by the 2 violent fellows and scattered on the ground. The entrance to the stone room appeared in front of them. The two stepped on the broken statues and entered the stone room hand in hand. Only the sound of two gears turning could be heard. It was an extremely subtle sound. In less than a second, several metal fences came down from behind the two of them. These metal fences rose and fell one after another. For a moment, such sounds came from all around them. Arbor and Emolien stood in the middle of the stone room. They turned to look and found that they were surrounded by metal fences. It was as if they were in a large circular prison. There were vertical fences all around them, and the gaps between the fences were so small that even a baby's hand could not squeeze through. The two of them looked at each other, then looked around. They were sure that they were locked in this metal cage. The stench grew stronger, until an earth-shattering roar rang out. Emolien shielded his wifey as they retreated a few steps back. The two of them looked up at the same time and saw a monster clinging to the ceiling of the stone room. That pair of small, flickering red eyes were staring at them without blinking. Arbor almost vomited in disgust. F*CK, what the hell is this? It was even more disgusting than a human-faced spider. In any case, the human-faced arachnid was really a spider. Aside from its head that resembled a human, the rest of its body was very strange. It had the slender legs of a spider, and a total of 12 of them. Each of her slender legs was covered with a layer of needle-like fur. Looking at it, one's scalp couldn't help but feel slightly numb. Each of its 12 legs had a small suction cup that allowed it to suck on anything. Xiao Mu subconsciously squirmed behind Emolien, her eyes vigilantly gazing at the human-headed spider that was sucking on the ceiling. Hiss! That guy let out a prelude to an attack. Suddenly, it pounced down from the ceiling and opened its mouth to spray a green mucus at the two of them. That liquid fell to the ground and immediately corroded a hole. It could be seen that the poison was very strong. After the human-headed spider realized that its attack had missed, it quickly retreated a few steps. It was very human-like and vigilantly looked at the two of them. Arbor made a prompt decision. He tore an attack talisman and threw it in its direction. Chapter 29:32. But when the attack talismans hit the human-headed spider's body, it was like scratching an itch. There were no sparks at all, and it didn't even leave a white mark on its body. Arbor hurriedly looked up at Emolien. This monster shouldn't have already entered the god realm, right? Emolien pulled him back. This thing's body is full of hidden weapons. You should first open the defensive barrier. Before he could finish his sentence, the human-headed spider launched another attack at them. This time, while it was spitting out mucus from its mouth, its 12 slender spider legs were moving forward very quickly. Its movements were very fast, and in a flash, it had already arrived in front of Prince Mo. The monster's 4 forelimbs were like sickles, cutting in all directions. With a slight twist, it cut towards Arbor's neck. Emolien pulled his Jojo over, and a long staff suddenly appeared in his hand. He swiftly blocked the human-headed spider's slender legs. The slender legs kept twisting in front of Emolien, desperately trying to stab at her. Emolien flipped his hand, and several balls of purple flames abruptly landed on the human-headed spider's 2 slender legs. The long hairy legs crackled as they were being roasted by the purple flames. Suddenly, the hairs on the legs shot out like steel needles. Emolien had already been on guard, and when those steel needles were thrown over, they were blocked by a barrier formed by the purple flames. With a light flip of his hand, the Raven Moon sword in Emolien's hand once again emitted a jet-black luster. A majestic sword intent appeared in the air, and with unparalleled speed and power, it cut towards the hairy-legged spider in front of them. This human-headed spider was also a clever one, and it immediately felt that the situation was very bad. The sword intent that burst out from this guy in front of it almost instantly made it timid, and it immediately wanted to retreat. But it was a pity that this was a huge cage surrounded by iron fences. Where could this human-headed spider retreat to? When it retreated, it realized that its path of retreat had already been blocked. This huge sword intent was right in front of it, and a black flame was burning behind it. It burned quietly but brilliantly, and the thick black color made it tremble from the bottom of its heart. Hiss, 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 hiss. The creature roared loudly. Its 12 slender legs were hesitant to move forward or backward. It was difficult for it to move forward. Emolienne naturally wouldn't give it much time to consider. She waved her right hand slightly, and a majestic sword intent descended from the sky, rapidly approaching the human-headed spider. Hiss! The human-headed spider let out a mournful cry. Arba came out from behind Emolienne and stole a glance at the thing. He was so disgusted that goosebumps appeared all over his body. This thing was still spitting out green mucus from its mouth. Because its chin was being forcefully pressed against by Emolienne's sword intent, every ball of mucus dripped onto its body due to the distance. The human-headed spider with a body of copper skin and iron bones was actually corroding itself to the point of howling. Arba looked at this scene and couldn't help but want to laugh. The sword intent that Emolienne had summoned was using a slow speed that was visible to the naked eye to slowly disintegrate this human-headed spider. Its little red eyes revealed a look of fear. Originally, it wanted to shrink back a little, but the blazing black fire behind it caused it to shiver all over. It clearly looked like a faint wisp of black flame, but it had such power. I coughed. Oh, I just ate loquat paste. I can't take it anymore. Chapter 29:33. Hiss! Just a moment, she discovered to her horror that her 2 slender legs had been completely melted by the pitch-black sword intent. Its remaining 7 or 8 legs couldn't help but tremble. They watched as its body disappeared inch by inch under the huge black sword. Finally, the sword intent pierced through the human-headed spider's body and sent it flying. It heavily smashed through several iron fences. It flew out and crashed into the wall of the stone room, creating a loud rumbling sound. A faint black flame burned on its face, causing it to let out heart-wrenching screams. After a few minutes, the man's cries slowly died down. Only a pile of black powder was left in the corner. Nothing else could be seen. Just as the 2 of them flew out of the thin fence with a hole in it, they saw the entire roof of the stone room collapse. A loud bang resounded throughout the entire stone chamber. Between the stone ceiling and the ground, there was not the slightest gap. If he didn't have the ability to escape from it, he would have turned into minced meat by now. The 2 of them hurriedly left this stone room and walked into the stone room next door. These 3 stone chambers were connected. The human-headed arachnid's room was the largest stone room in the center. There were 2 smaller stone rooms on the left and right. As soon as Arba stepped in, he quickly retreated. Even though he blocked his 5 senses, he was still shocked by the disgusting scene in front of him. This was the place where the heavenly fate created people. As soon as he walked in, he saw strings of people hanging on the walls. It would be more appropriate to call them puppets now. Just like hanging sausages and bacon, these people were also hung on the 3 walls in different categories. Their limbs were all twisted and grotesque. Although everyone was breathing weakly, it was obvious that they were no longer conscious. There were men and women among them. There were even 4 or 5 old people and a child who was missing a leg. The scene was almost too horrible to look at. Even someone like Arba, who had experienced 2 lifetimes, felt extremely miserable. He didn't want to look at it a second time. Moreover, the little monk was only a child. It was better to avoid such a bloody scene. The layout of the 2 stone rooms on the left and right were basically the same. In the middle were rows of medicinal troughs, and beside them were piles of inferior herbs. Inside a black medicine furnace, a tiny flame was burning. There was a small bowl next to it, and there was still some residue left in it. Emolienne sighed and looked at the people hanging on the wall. She reached out and pulled the little girl to her side. "Let's go. Ask Mr. Su to take over and deal with these people. Even if these test subjects were saved, they wouldn't be able to live for long. When the time came, let them die with some dignity." Could it be that the mutated medicine made by Tian Yun was extracted from some animals and plants? It shouldn't be that simple. Emolienne shook her head. But from the looks of it, they're still improving their medicine. That human-headed spider should also be one of Tian Yun's test subjects. Whether it was in terms of strength or speed, The human-headed spider was undoubtedly a success. It was very powerful, but it had also become a mindless, zombie-like monster. What was the point of such a change? This should be the improved medicine that they concocted. Emolien lowered his eyes. Chapter 29:34. After pondering for a moment, Emolien continued, the liquid used to create zombies and special ability users should be considered as the basic liquid. First eliminate a portion of the weak, then convert a portion of the strong into special ability users. After that, use this improved liquid to create an all-round strong person. Then we can realize the dream of ordinary people to become strong. Arbor nodded her little head vigorously. What is this Sky Fate organization thinking? They spent so much time and effort for so many years, just to fulfill a dream? Let's not care about what they think for now. Since they can't figure it out, there's no need to waste their brain power to think about these time-consuming things. When Arbor and Emolien came out of the passage and returned to the ice tree, the little monk immediately stopped knocking on the wooden fish and walked over to Arbor's side with his short legs. Two small hands gripped onto Arbor's skirt. The little monk's round eyes emitted a nervous light. Benefactress, are you all right? Were you attacked by the Een energy? This little monk has a heavenly protective talisman here. It can expel evil and avoid danger. It can also dissolve the Een energy. The little guy mumbled as he took out a crumpled yellow talisman from his little pocket. Arbor couldn't help but twitch the corner of her mouth, silently taking the broken talisman that he held up high. Looking at it, she asked expressionlessly, "Where did you get this?" Speaking of this, the little monk couldn't help but sigh, pretending to be an old man. "Master Abbot gave it to me. Back then, it was the treasure of our temple. This bald Donkey Kong Een, he even tricked a little kid. What kind of heavenly protective talisman is this? It's a fake talisman with no talisman power at all. Who knows where the old monk got it from? How is it, benefactress? Do you feel a wave of warm steam coming out?" Arbor shook her head, bending down to pick up the child, but Prince Emo snatched him from the side. The little monk Kong Kong glared at Emolien in dissatisfaction. "Benefactress, don't always steal benefactress Kong Kong." And the emptiness of the benefactress. Emolien felt a little uncomfortable listening to him. She raised her hand and poked his bald head. "You talk too much." She casually stuffed a small steamed bun into his mouth, successfully blocking the chatterbox Kong Kong's little mouth. "When we get back, let Knight Doc Shang and the others bring Mr. Su and move everything in this stone room back to carefully study it." They had never seized so many drugs or test subjects before. This made Su Shuetao and the others busy for quite a while. Arbor didn't understand, but he didn't ask much. He thought that the Mr. Su that Emolien mentioned should be a talented person. What about him? Prince Emo lowered his head and saw the old village chief lying on the ground, glaring at the two of them with venomous eyes. Just now, when he went down for a stroll, he almost forgot about the culprit. As soon as Emolien opened her mouth, the surrounding villagers became agitated, clamoring, "Kill him, kill him, kill him." The old village chief lay on the ground, his eyes staring at Arbor, staring at her. That gaze made Emolien a little angry, and she kicked him to the side. "If you stare at my Jojo again, I'll dig your eyeballs out." Arbor didn't feel anything uncomfortable, anyway. The village chief in front of her could only stare at her with those dead fish eyes. Chapter 29:35. Emolien was still hesitating whether to kill him or wait for Mr. Su to come over and bring him over for research. She saw several people rush forward, punching and kicking the old village chief without saying a word. It was obvious that the villagers who were deceived by him hated the old village chief to the core. At this moment, they really wanted to eat his blood and bite his flesh. Arbor looked at this group of angry villagers and sighed. He turned his head and said, "Let's go." Emolien nodded, turned her head and lightly ordered, "You two take some people and rescue those people who are hanging on the wall. When Chia and Doc Shang bring Mr. Su over, hand over all the tools in the stone room to him." "Yes." Two responses immediately sounded from a place where no one was around. Not long after Emolien and the others left, several black-clothed youths led people down the stone stairs. Not long after, the entire underground village was filled with the cries of the villagers. Those who were rescued and on the verge of death, none of them were spared. Almost all of them were exhaling more than they were inhaling. These people were the relatives and friends of the villagers. All these years, because of the old village chief's deceit, they all felt like they were in a dream. They didn't suspect the old village chief at all. But they didn't expect that the most honest person was the monster who stole their family members. As long as they thought of the words of those youths, they understood that their family members were used as test subjects in that evil stone room all these years and suffered endless suffering. They couldn't help but feel sad. The atmosphere in the entire underground village was very depressing. Sigh. Lu Zheng couldn't help but sigh. I really didn't expect that after us two old brothers muddled through so many years, the world would have such earth-shaking changes. Tian Yun, this organization, didn't know when it appeared. In the 3 continents, how many places like this underground village base were there? It couldn't be that their bases were everywhere, and there were eyes everywhere, coldly looking at them in the gloomy darkness. Thinking of this, Chen Qi couldn't help but shrug his shoulders and tremble slightly. Seeing the villagers hugging the corpses of their loved ones and crying bitterly, to be honest, they felt rather uncomfortable. They were all humans, but the Sky Fate organization actually treated them like puppets and manipulated them. This was truly perverted. Arbor shook his head. If only they were a little bit more cautious. If he had been vigilant from the beginning, perhaps he wouldn't have been fooled by an old village chief. Let's have them settle down properly. Emolien squeezed Xiao Mu's small hand as he looked up at the rosy clouds that towered into the clouds. They had been tossing and turning for the whole night, and the sky was starting to brighten. The rosy clouds peak in front of him seemed to be bathed in a layer of milky white light, exuding a holy white light. Clouds rose, and white mist filled the air. The faintly discernible peaks of the mountains were like young girls covered in white gauze, graceful and graceful. The rosy cloud's peak was the tallest peak in the middle, and there were 12 other peaks surrounding it. A silvery white waterfall poured down from the rosy cloud's peak, like 10,000 horses galloping, and the roaring sound of water could be heard from far away. Whoosh whoosh. Before Arbor could react, he saw 2 eggs hurriedly flying out of the paradise, jumping and cheering toward the waterfall. Chapter 29:36. This place was this good? Arbor blinked and turned to look at her husband. Even little Bai An's egg could sense the rich spirit energy here and impatiently flew out of the paradise on its own. With 2 flaps, it dashed straight into that waterfall. Lu Zhang jumped in fright and hastily shouted, "Second Sect Master, pay attention. That waterfall on Red Cloud Peak looks like it's filled with spirit energy, but it's actually not. Second Sect Master, the waterfall is actually filled with holy power, so we don't dare to rashly jump in and try. Hurry and bring your eggs back, or else we'll really lose everything." Emolien's mouth twitched inexplicably. What was going on? Why did his words give people the urge to beat this Chen Qi to death? The little stoic expressionlessly glanced at them. "My 2 eggs haven't been able to hatch. If they can hatch in this waterfall, then it'll really be excellent." Chen Qi and Lu Zhang looked at each other in dismay. "Second Sect Master, what are these 2 eggs?" "Holy Beast Bai An's eggs." The 2 old men were only casually asking, but the answer they received almost made them drop their jaws. It couldn't be, right? This little fellow was carrying 2 Holy Beast Bai An's eggs with her? Look at those fist-sized eggs hopping into the waterfall and roaming around with incomparable joy. How enviable was her appearance. This waterfall couldn't really cleanse her entire body and absorb holy power at the same time, right? Seeing that the old man Chen Qi was itching to give it a try, Arbor expressionlessly said, "Let's go to Red Cloud Peak first." The 2 people instantly wilted and turned around to look at Xiao Mu. The little stoic muttered in a low voice, "They're already so old, yet they still don't know how to be calm. They're like two eggs and still want to hop back and forth. It's simply hilarious. Chen Qi and Lu Zheng looked at each other. The little stoic spoke so loudly that they could all hear it, okay? The four people swiftly ascended Red Cloud Peak with the little monk. When Chen Qi saw the palace with a glazed roof, green tiles, and a mottled outer wall, his eyes couldn't help but brim with tears. Yes, it's here, second sect leader. This is the location chosen by our Xuanji school's first-generation master. Chen Qi began to cry. When the old man cried, Lu Zheng also thought about how he had wasted so many years. If he took all of it, he could accompany his junior martial sister to travel around, or he could stay at Red Cloud's Peak and continue to develop the sect. It would be much more meaningful than wasting so many years doing nothing. Arbor rubbed the little monk's head. The small monk then took out 2 square handkerchiefs from his small pocket. He handed one to Chen Qi and the other to Lu Zheng, and said seriously, "Benefactors, don't cry. You two aren't the most miserable people in the world. Compared to those poor villagers just now, you should know. A healthy body with 4 limbs is more beautiful than anything else." Just like that, Chen Qi and Lu Zheng's little bit of nostalgia for the sect that had just been brewing was interrupted by the little monk. Arbor found it a bit funny and lowered his head to rub the little monk's bald head. He turned to Chen Qi and Lu Zheng and said, "I want to leave the 6 mountain peaks on the left for the Holy Water sect to use. I will use a formation to separate the 2 sections. This part will be the Xuanji school's territory, and the other will be the Holy Water sect's territory. What do you think?" Chen Qi expressed that he didn't have any objections and nodded before saying something heart-wrenching. "Our Xuanji school only has 3 people in total. Second sect leader, do as you wish. Bye, wait until I get better and return to normal. Oh. Chapter 29:37. Arbor was instantly speechless. Although these 2 old men were indeed speaking the truth, they were too blunt. If a sect only had 3 people including the sect master, people would probably laugh their heads off if they heard about it. "Second sect master, you know how to set up formations?" Once Lu Zheng mentioned formations, his interest in conversation was piqued. Arbor swept him a glance and silently summoned the mechanism diagram from his conscious. "I'll set up a simple Great Barrier formation between the left and right mountain peaks. What do you think?" Lu Zheng wanted to cry a bit. He had painstakingly created this mechanism diagram for many years, pouring his heart and soul into it. Each of the 18 formation diagrams inside was the best of the best. He originally wanted to show off to Chen Qi when he sparred with him, but when he thought of this, he inwardly vomited blood again. He forced a bitter expression and said, "This place is too big. If I want to set up a barrier formation, this little formation diagram probably won't be of much use." "Oh, then you do it." Xiao Mu silently put away that matrix map and went with the flow to say this. "Lien, let's go eat. Thank you for your trouble, Elder Lu. I'll give you 4 hours to set up the Great Barrier formation." Sir Jojo expressionlessly walked past the old man and turned to clench his small fist at him. "Work hard." Lu Zheng was stupefied. On the side, Chen Qi couldn't resist bursting out in laughter. Lu Zheng's deflated appearance was truly too hilarious. He had been old brothers with this old fellow for several hundred years, but he had never seen him so helpless and deflated. As expected, the little stoic sect master was a talent. She could infuriate Lu Zheng, this old man, to the point of hopping about with just a few words. The 2 of them pushed open the door and walked into the palace whose outer walls were rather mottled. Inside the empty main hall, light red gauze curtains hung everywhere. As the cold wind drifted in from outside the window, the gauze curtains fluttered gently. Arbor pulled Mo Lien around the main hall for a stroll. The furnishings in the hall were also quite old, and they looked quite exquisite. Arbor pulled Mo Lien along and strolled around the back of the palace. The Xuanji Palace was quite big. As long as they found some people to repair it a little and change some clean living equipment, they would be able to move in directly. Xiao Mu thought of those two idle sect elders and decided to hand over the work of repairing and purchasing items to those two to handle. Achoo, achoo. Chen Qi sneezed twice, rubbed his nose, and walked to the side. From his vantage point, he could only see a waterfall that looked like a silver dragon descending rapidly. The two eggs were jumping and rolling in the pool under the waterfall, as if they were very comfortable, and kept rubbing against each other. Chen Qi could not help but click his tongue in wonder. He turned back and continued to watch Lu Zheng set up the isolation formation. According to the second sect master's intention, after the two sects were isolated, the rosy cloud's peak in the middle would be the hub connecting the two sections. They would open up a path on the side for people to come and go. This path was far away from the Xuanji Palace. Even if people came and went, it would not affect the palace. Lu Zheng leaped into the air. His palms were covered with dense saint energy. Nobody could see how he moved his arms, but one by one, huge boulders were moved from the mountain peaks in all directions. Following that were flowers, trees, branches, sand, and so on, dancing in the air. One after another, large trees with twisted roots were sucked in by his palms and transplanted here. Chapter 29:38. When Arbor walked over with a unique little food box and a piece of apple, her eyes lit up when she saw the scenery in front of her. Great Elder Lu was indeed a formation master who had lived for hundreds of years. In less than 2 hours, he had actually changed the appearance of Rosy Cloud's Peak. Rosy Cloud's Peak was now divided into yin and yang by him using flowers, trees, and stones. The formation plates were buried in the four corners. The Xuanji Palace where Arbor lived was located facing the sun. Not only was there plenty of light, but it was also modified to be warm in winter and cool in summer. The path in the middle was completely blocked off with flowers and trees. While she was eating, Great Elder Lu had transplanted the entire bamboo forest from one of the mountain peaks to this place. In this way, the Xuanji Palace was completely located in the depths of the bamboo forest and wouldn't be disturbed by the passage at all. As for the passage connecting the two sects, Great Elder Lu had also made it very imposing. Not only did he use large stones to build a stone bridge, but he also introduced a waterfall that meandered along the stone bridge. The two paths were filled with the fragrance of plants, birds, and flowers. In the middle was a small bridge with flowing water. It was very unique. Arbor was very satisfied with Great Elder Lu's skill in setting up formations. Although her face was still paralyzed, the little fellow walked over and placed the food box in front of Elder Lu. She said expressionlessly, "There's a pot of plum blossom wine inside." Elder Lu hurriedly took the food box, removed the veil, and chuckled as he took his food and sat to the side. Chen Qi saw this and hurried over. He couldn't help but sigh as he ate. The food cooked by the second-generation sect master is really mediocre, but the wine he makes is really good. Lu Zheng nodded. Beside him, he couldn't help but open his mouth and crawl up from the ground. Chen Qi also hurriedly stood up and turned to look. He couldn't help but reveal the same shocked expression as Lu Zheng. He saw Arbor standing on the stone bridge. With a move of her finger, pieces of glowing white jade talismans flew out from her inner world. The isolation talisman formation was set on top of the isolation formation set up by Elder Lu. Once it was added, the mountain peaks on both sides became more and more humid. The visibility of cultivators was almost no more than 1 meter. After Arbor finished setting up the isolation array on both sides, he began to set up 2 mystic guiding array glyphs. These 2 mystic guiding talisman matrices could endlessly absorb all the spiritual energy within a radius of several hundred kilometers before distributing it to the Xuanji sect and the Holy Water sect. Qiu. Xiao Mu instructed, "Go plant that shielding tree." "All right." A little tray ant suddenly jumped out from Paradise Planet, carrying 2 main branches of the essence concealing tree on its small shoulders. Behind him, there was also a little water baby and a little dirt lump jumping around. Master Silver, let's go nourish this shielding tree and make it grow faster." Arbor nodded and watched the 3 of them leave through the tunnel. Once this isolation glyph array was activated, it would be impossible to open this passageway that connected the two sects unless it was someone with a key. Auber held a jade talisman in his hand, which was the key to open the isolation array. She could create a key like this with a casual drawing. She had as many as she wanted. The Holy Water sect still had to live their own lives. All the senior sisters needed to continuously train and grow in order to keep up with the cultivators of the divine province. After setting up the mystic guiding talisman formation, what made Lu Zhang and Chen Qi's jaws drop was that this wasn't the end. The two of them couldn't help but feel heartache for the second-generation sect master when they saw countless jade talismans flying out of her sleeves endlessly. Chapter 29-39 4. 539 Double Defense Array. How many jade talismans would this consume? If this continued, wouldn't they use up all the jade talismans that they had saved up for decades in one go? The two of them stood there and stared at Auber, who was setting up the array, with complicated gazes. This time, Auber was going to set up a defense array around the 13th peak, and it was a double defense array. This defense array needed to be set up around the 6 peaks on the left and another one on the 6 peaks on the right. Then, an outer layer of defense array glyphs would be set up around the entire peak. The amount of defensive talismans consumed would be at a jaw-dropping level. Chen Qi didn't know how many talismans he had silently counted in his heart. He realized that the second-generation faction leader was simply a madman. Oh no, a monster. How could an ordinary person have so many talismans on them? The second-generation faction leader must have used up all the defensive talismans that he had accumulated for 3 generations in one go. If he used so many defensive talismans to fight someone, he would probably be able to exhaust the enemy for 10 days and 8 nights, hiding in the defensive array glyphs and not coming out, angering the enemy to death. Thinking of this, Lu Zhang and Chen Qi couldn't help but shudder. Terrifying. The second-generation faction leader's spending was really too frightening. Chen Qi felt that when he saw Lu Zhang set up the Flowerstone array, it was already shocking enough. But he didn't expect that the second-generation faction leader's move would be even more shocking and extraordinary. When Chen Qi silently counted the number of jade talismans consumed to 6,844, he couldn't even maintain the expression of shock on his face. It was almost completely replaced by horror, and his mouth even opened in a comical manner. Emolien glanced at the two of them, then directly shifted his gaze away, no longer looking at the two silly old men. His gaze naturally and attentively fell on Jojo, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously curled into a faint smile. Every time he saw Jojo throw talismans, he felt that it was a kind of visual enjoyment. The way he threw talismans was simply too beautiful, and he threw out so many talismans at once without even blinking. He was really too high-spirited. Auber spent a full day and night on this double defense array glyphs. It wasn't until dawn the next day that Auber let out a sigh of relief and lowered his arms. Her eyes looked as if they had been washed by clear water, bright and clean. When she turned her head and met Emolien's gaze, she couldn't help but run over to him. Emolien naturally hurried forward and caught her sprinting figure. "Why are you running?" Auber grinned. He turned around and saw the two old faces of Chen Qi and Lu Zheng. Both of them were expressionless. This expression looked strangely familiar. Auber blinked and couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong with you two?" Although Lu Zhang did not express his stance, it was as if a mountain torrent was pouring out from the bottom of his heart, roaring and roaring non-stop. Chen Qi, on the other hand, glanced at her several times. After some deliberation, he asked, "Second sect master, are all 3 generations of your family talisman masters?" Auber smirked. "You can say that. But what does those 3 generations of talisman masters have to do with her? You've taken out all the defensive jade talismans accumulated by your family's 3 generations, and used them all up in a day." Chen Qi said expressionlessly. Auber couldn't help but feel helpless. How were these talismans accumulated by her family's 3 generations? These were just talismans that she drew bit by bit in her spare time. They weren't worth much. Chapter 2940. Of course, Arbor had also run to Fish Orchid Planet to draw thousands of defensive talismans while she was eating. Only then did she manage to gather enough talismans. Blinking his large eyes, Sir Jojo turned to Molien and said, "Lien, the blank jade talismans have all been used up. It's all right, I've already instructed them to speed up the production. I'll have them send them to the Academy in the next 2 days." Arbor nodded her little head vigorously. Most of the defensive talismans around her had been used up and she only had about 100 defensive talismans left. It was really too little. Chen Qi and Lu Zhang perked up their ears to eavesdrop on their conversation. They couldn't help but look at each other silently and ask in unison, "Second Sect Master, you didn't draw all these talismans, did you?" Second Sect Master was a strange talisman master. Wasn't he a little different from other talisman masters? Other talisman masters would dawdle for an entire afternoon and successfully draw 1 or 2 talismans. It was already considered good. But Second Sect Master had taken out 8,688 defensive jade talismans just now. Don't ask them how they knew. They had all been counting silently in their hearts. Based on the average talisman master's speed of drawing 2 talismans a day, they could only draw 700 talismans a year. Second Sect Master's 8,000 jade talismans, wouldn't other people take more than 10 years to draw them? Was this normal? Qiao Mu gazed at the 2 people in bewilderment. Before they could continue asking, she said, "Elders, that Jade Star Palace of mine seems to have been around for quite some time already, right?" The 2 elders' eyelids twitched violently. Now that this sect leader has returned, repairing the residence has become the first priority. She turned her head to look at the 2 old men. "Go find a few craftsmen and renovate the palace inside and out. Change all the furniture that should be changed. If I have time, I'll come back and stay for a while." In the future, this would be her other residence outside of the Eastern Palace. Chen Qi opened his mouth and found that the words that came out of his mouth had become an obedient response. "Okay. Okay, my ass." He was an elder of the Xuanji sect. When did he become a servant? Since when did purchasing supplies and repairing the palace become his job? Chen Qi was speechless. He turned his head and glared at Arbor. After Arbor finished dealing with the double defensive array, he pinched his fingers, and a rumbling sound came from outside the defensive array. Now, the talisman formation that she had set up could be activated according to her thoughts. The opening and closing of the talisman all depended on her handprint. There was no need to use the jade talisman as a key. Arbor and Demo Lien crossed the stone bridge side by side and arrived at one of the peaks. "Second Martial Uncle, are you coming out now?" Arbor asked Yang Shirong a few times, and when he heard her say yes, he pulled her out of the Fish Orchid Planet. Yang Shirong had already found out from Little Tree that Arbor had chosen an excellent location for the sect. She was extremely excited. The moment she stepped out, Yang Shirong felt an abundance of spiritual energy surging around her body. Next, she felt that the scenery in front of her was picturesque. Every peak was like a beautiful garden. There were mountains, rivers, stones, and trees. She just needed to find a few craftsmen and polish them. "Second Martial Uncle, how about we settle down here in the future?" The spiritual energy here was very rich. The spiritual energy that had been drawn in from hundreds of kilometers away was all absorbed by the mystic energy guiding talisman formation. In less than a second, the 13 peaks with the red clouds peak as the center were surrounded by dense spiritual energy. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.